So my absolute favorite podcast is this podcast by Dan Carlin called Hardcore History. It is significantly better history education than I ever got in school or in college. He describes himself as an amateur historian. He claims to have no professional credentials or academic credentials whatsoever. But every episode, he just takes a topic and then he goes and reads 15 books about it and talks to 15 researchers about it and then comes back and tells you that historical period as a story. Like, so imagine like your very well-informed uncle describing things to you. And again, he doesn't care about length. You can always start with his first few episodes where I think like a lot of podcasts, he really eases people into it with shorter sort of 20, 25 minute, 30 minute episodes. But when he really gets going, there's I think a 5-part series which totals up to almost about 10 hours of recording time, which is just about the fall of Rome. And his explanation is so lucid. It's like he's telling you a story about people that he sort of actually knew, who was there. Like his entire style of talking is like, तो बाद में तेरे को पता है क्या हुआ ना, तो ये आदमी वो मतलब भड़क गया और फिर, so he's the American equivalent of that. So it's beautiful. You never get tired. It's one of the few podcasts I can say. I know there's a phrase for this. I keep forgetting what it's called. But that effect, you know, where they talk about where if you were listening while driving, you park your car and then you just sit there waiting for the episode to finish. And Hardcore History is one of those where I remember I have sat for 30 minutes. 30 minutes. I sat in my car. I'm like, I can pause this. I can go upstairs. I can just put it on my speaker and I can just continue to listen. But no, 30 minutes. I was just so enraptured by his sort of fall of Rome. And he's got multi-episode arcs on all of the greatest events in history. And he's tremendously fun to listen to. So Dan Carlin's Hardcore History would be number 1 on that list. I also really like listening to the Reply All podcast. They have some really nice stories about the internet, and they in general go into the internet culture and they go into all of those things, which I think is really cool. Business Wars is really fun. I really enjoy Business Wars, where it just takes one business rivalry and then over 3 to 4 episodes just goes into the history of it. Again, if I had to recommend, I would absolutely recommend the DC versus Marvel one. And I would absolutely recommend Netflix versus HBO versus Blockbuster. I used to be a huge fan of when John Oliver and Andy Zaltzman used to do The Bugle together, but now I think Oliver's too busy to do that podcast. There's also other great ones that I enjoy, that I listen to a little more sporadically. But there's one called 99% Invisible, which is about design, which is pretty cool. Radiolab, of course, is like the OG. And if you're looking for long form, fascinating journalism and podcasting, I still think they are the gold standard. I was hooked to Serial for season 1. Then I spent some time thinking about it, like, should I really be judging the merits of a case based on a podcast? I don't know. And then I sort of turned away from that. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for podcasts right now.
I think podcast is one of those things जहाँ पे niche होती है ना हर चीज की, because sometimes people get like so specific. So is there any weird podcast that you might have heard of? It doesn't need to be a recommendation. यार लोगों ने इस पे भी podcast बनाया हुआ है.
So you know what's a really fun podcast? What's a really fun podcast? Actually, I'm glad you reminded me about this. Have you guys heard My Dad Wrote a Porno? It is exactly as the title says, about a guy who discovers that there was a point at which his dad wrote pornographic literature. And he finds one of the books and he's like, okay, we are going to do this. And it is exactly as hilarious as you would think it is. And it is literally a multi-episode podcast about this guy going through a porno that his dad made, and it's too good.